Making the melee system for my game feel great has been one of the top things floating around in my mind since day one. And up until recently has been the same since the first week of development, but I wasn't completely satisfied with it yet. Fast forward to the other week when I'm playing Cult of the Lamb, a game recommended to me by a friend as a roguelike point of reference. It had this sort of top-down combat that I had been searching for to study. Because I'm developing a mobile game, I need the combat to feel right using touch input. The game supports controllers, but I didn't want to make it a requirement and leave touch players behind. I originally tried looking at other mobile games, but I couldn't find anything that I was looking for. A lot of the top-down games were shooters, or the melee systems were a lot more auto-lock-on and auto-targeting. So the current issue with the combat is the player awkwardly bumping into the enemy when attacking, causing them to take damage, and the player's hits towards the enemy just aren't satisfying enough, with the knockback system being kind of like halfway right. You can also see in some old gameplay here that I'm trying to walk backwards while attacking, trying to avoid collision. But what I noticed about Cult of the Lamb was how the player lunges forward into place when attacking and stopping all movement until the end of the attack. So something as simple as that gave me the inspiration to improve, because it gave me that extra oomph that I was looking for. It's something that may have been floating around in my mind to do, kind of being like on the tip of my tongue, but actually seeing it gives you this sort of confirmation. Now, Cult of the Lamb actually uses a 3D environment with 2D objects. It has a lot more detail and sprites and animations and everything else compared to my game. So the goal isn't necessarily to copy it, it's just a small amount of inspiration to spark an idea based on gameplay feel, where I'm using a single sprite for all 4 directions of movement, it's completely flat top down, and we aren't using a combo system at all as well. So in between getting burned out on the loot system, I decided to spend the good part of the day working on these changes. The challenge being trying to replicate that same sort of idea and feel while dealing with how simple I have intended to keep things. So I simply started off by stopping movement when attacking, which made a good start from knocking into enemies. After that was in place, I added velocity in the direction that the player is moving the stick, and then have that velocity sharply reduce after. I spent a little while just tweaking this to get it to feel right, and then making second adjustments again when I realized that I put the reduction of velocity in update instead of fixed update, causing different effects between my phone and the PC. One trick to getting this to work was starting to increase the velocity a fraction of a second after starting the attack, so the player moves right about when they start to swing, letting the attack stop to anticipate for that fraction of a second. Now everything with the player was starting to feel really good already. It really had this sort of oomph to it that it didn't have before, and in general just feels a lot more snappy. The start-stop motion adds a great impact to it visually and practically in a mechanical way too, especially after I made some slight adjustments to the knockback system. I managed to wedge in the velocity reduction I used for the attack after figuring that out. This increased how quickly they flung back, but then quickly reduced their speed, making things smoother and more natural, whereas before they would fly back at a constant velocity and then just stop. Lastly, if the player just stands still, they won't lunge at all. I was thinking of including it, but I found it to be useful as a way for the player to attack defensively, whereas lunging and moving forward would be more aggressive and offensive. The game will register the player's last input movement and attack in that direction instead, standing still. And after all that was said and done, I just spent some time playing it on mobile, and it just feels less awkward in general. You're still dealing with touchscreen buttons, so it's as good as it can be really, and it was just much more manageable to play. I think it's about 90% there. I may touch up on it towards the end of development, but right now I'm actually really happy with the changes. Since we're on the topic of melee combat anyways, I may as well cover some of the other changes that I made since the last video. The special slide attack the player can do also had issues with collisions and bumping into enemies and just conflicted with the knockback system, so instead, I just set it so that the player and the enemy collision is turned off during sliding, and it worked out significantly better. Now, I mentioned in the previous video about not having some of the player stats hooked up yet, so now they are. Starting with the sliding attack, when you improve your speed, increasing this will allow the player to zip all over the map really fast. The example shown is just kind of what it looks like when you pump all of your points into it, but it will really be more of a slow, gradual build-up. Next, I found it was really simple to manipulate the player's animation control speed. So it was really easy to set up the player's attack speed, which will be modified by their stats, but also by heavy weapons and dagger weapons from different items that the player will find. Which leads me back to the loot system, which is the next major system I have been working away on for a little while. So here's a little preview. So far, I have a ton of generating loot that can be equipped to the player with a lot of different items I have already designed. None of it has any effect on the player just yet, but it will. And you can't find it in the map either. I just set it to automatically generate with this button for now. But you'll see it all in full later. I'll make a larger video when the whole thing is complete, and probably have the Discord community set up by then. That's if you're still interested. Are you? Let me know. Write a comment or something, or don't. I don't care. Alright, now do the thing where you push the button that says subscribe or something. I heard it helps.